Hey everybody, Coach Toolshed here, and today I'm going to be bringing you my review for Marvel's Spider-Man, the Sony exclusive game that just came out last week, which was brought to us by the fine folks over at Insomniac Games. And this is a game that's been getting a lot of attention, and actually there was a report going around that this is the fastest selling game of 2018 to this point, which means that it's been outpacing God of War and Far Cry 5 and Monster Hunter World and all that. So this is a game that has obviously been pretty successful if that report is true, and this is a game that's been getting a lot of praise from a lot of people, and I wanted to get into my review and let you know what I thought, because I think there's been a couple things that is not really going widely talked about, and I'm seeing a lot of just outright praise for the game, and there's been some stuff that I think has been glossed over and needs to be brought to people's attention before maybe they sink $60 into this title. Now, before I get into some of my issues that I had with the game, I want to say that first and foremost, I did have fun playing this game. So I want to put that out there right away. This is not a game that I dislike, but there is some issues with the game that I'm going to get into. But I want to put that out there right away that I had fun playing this game. It's a fun game to play. Now, there's a reason for that, and the reason for that is at the core of what I feel is the best part of the game, and that is the character movement. When you are controlling Spider-Man, when you're flying through the city on your web, and you're swinging between buildings as fast as you can, and jumping up through the air, it feels fantastic. I have not actually played another game where I felt like I had more control over my character in a third-person action game of this type. Not with any other game that I've played did I feel like I could just do whatever I wanted. I could go wherever I wanted. I didn't have to worry about falling. You don't take fall damage in this game, so you can just fly around as fast as you want. And the game is very forgiving, and the controls are very intuitive when it comes to traversal and getting around the city. It feels fantastic, and that is what the best part of the game is. And you're going to be doing it a lot, so that's good that it feels good. And the combat is very similar. It feels very solid. You know what you're doing. Once you get the ins and outs of the combat down, it's not difficult to pick up, but there is some moves that you're going to want to learn throughout the game that's going to make your life a lot easier. And as you get a little bit deeper into the combat mechanics, it's actually very fun to do the combat. And I know some people have compared it to the Arkham series and the Batman games because it looks a lot like that. And it does share a few similarities. But if you play the game yourself, you'd realize that it's not really like the Batman system at all. The Batman system of combat is what I like to call pinball combat, where basically you're just bouncing off enemies. You're going bang, bang. You just hit a directional button, and you hit the attack button, and he does the work for you. He's rolling around the screen. He's jumping through the air. He's flying across the map to hit guys in the face that you didn't even see because you weren't looking at him. You're just basically hitting a directional button, and he moves around. And it's similar to the old style that Assassin's Creed games used to use, where basically you just kept attacking in a circle, you bounce off enemies, and the only thing you need to worry about is when you had to hit the counter button to counter an attack. And Spider-Man does have some of that, but the key is that it's not a pinball combat system. If you just sit there and spam the attack button and hit a directional button, he's just going to stand there in one spot and kick midair. He's just going to be punching and swinging at nothing. You have to physically get him where you want him to go. He's not going to do everything for you. And that is what sets it apart from some of those other games. And I think it sets the combat ahead of some of those other games, especially the Arkham series. I feel like the combat in Spider-Man is better, but it's not more difficult. So it's kind of a drawback because I feel like the Batman combat is a little bit less forgiving, and Spider-Man gives you a lot more tricks that you can use, a lot more different moves that he has that are just natural baseline moves that you don't need to use your gadgets for, so you're not depleting your resources in that manner. It's just move after move after move that Spider-Man can do on what are pretty basic enemies, and so he can take them out a lot easier and more efficiently than I think Batman can in his game, and even in any other sort of brawler action type combat systems that I've seen. I recently played Yakuza earlier this year, and this has a similar sort of brawling aspect to it, but obviously Spider-Man can move around a lot better than you can in Yakuza, but it's that same type of, you against 10 guys that are surrounding you, and you just gotta knock them all out. Now, the problem with the combat is that you're doing it the whole game, and it doesn't change. It's a ton of very samey combat against very samey enemies. They basically just reskin the same enemies over and over again, and each faction or group that you come across is just going to be the same basic mob-type trash enemies, with very few exceptions. There's some brute enemies that you have to do a little bit extra work to take down. Later on in the game, you're going to come across some flying enemies in trash mobs that are going to take a little bit more work to take down. But on the whole, you're just going to be seeing the same sort of basic enemies. Some of them will be shooting at you, some of them will come in from melee, and some of them have a couple special weapons that they can use. But basically, you're just going to be killing thousands of guys in trash mobs. And that ties right into the story, too, and the main missions. Because that's what most of them just amount to, is just you going to a place, beating up a bunch of trash mobs, and then leaving, or going to the next spot and beating up another trash mob. And there's a couple of boss fights sprinkled in, but they don't really play out that different. It's just you versus one enemy, and it's just going to be dodge, 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 roll, fly out of the way with your swinging on a web, and then wait for the boss to tire himself out, and then you move in for a quick combo, and then it's back to dodge, dodge, dodge. Each boss really only has one or two moves. And if you learn those one or two moves, you've won the fight. You just dodge it until you have an opening, and then you attack. And the boss fights are a disappointment in that way. But the combat still feels good in your hands. So even though it might get repetitive, and it does, it still feels good throughout. You always feel everything's very kinetic. You feel like you have full control of Spider-Man, and it feels great. It really does. And that is the star of the game, is how it feels when it's in your hands. Watching it doesn't really give it to you, but every time you're swinging through the city, or you jump up in the air and you yank these enemies up in the air, or you knock them across the map, or you hook onto them and launch yourself to the enemies, and then you start doing your combos and whatever, you start throwing stuff around the map, it gives you an endorphin rush every time you do a little swing. And so every time you do it, it makes you feel good. And this is where the fun part of the game comes in, because you have fun doing it because of all the rushes that your body is giving you. Your brain's saying, this is fun, this is fun, this is fun, over and over. So this is why you have fun playing it. Because when you strip down the combat and the traversal and swinging through the city, what you have here is really just an extremely basic open world game that really does not do anything that we haven't seen before. And in fact, in many ways, this feels like a game that is 5 or 6 years old in many ways, even though it looks really good. And it does look great. And the cutscene animations are some of the best that you're going to find. They're not really at the top levels that we've seen in some of these other games, especially the Sony exclusives. But they're right there. They're right on the edge. They are really excellently made cutscene animations. The game itself looks great. It runs smoothly. I had a few hiccups here and there with frame rate, but really not a problem. The lighting in the city, it has that sort of not uber realistic, but sort of that comic book feel. It nails that sort of comic book character feeling where it's a little bit cartoony and realistic at the same time, and it looks great. All of the real life places look great. The neon lights when you're flying around the city at night, it all looks great. But like I said, at the end of the day, when you take away the glitz and the glamour and the movement and the really tight, visceral combat that you get, that great combat system, what you're left with is not much else. Now, if you're a big Spider-Man fan, you're still going to enjoy the game. And like I said, I still enjoy the game, and I'm not really into Spider-Man. It's not my jam. I don't have a problem with Spider-Man. It's just, it's not really. I'm just not into it. It's not my thing. And I liked what they did with the story. It was okay, and we'll get into that in a minute. But the problem with the game is, like I said, there's so much there that's just so basic, and it turns into the dreaded filler content. And I'm going to get into that as well just here in a bit. Now, like I said, I am not a huge Spider-Man fan. I have only just the most basic pop culture knowledge of him as a character. I don't really consume too much of the media that he's been in, the movies, the comic books, the games, all that. I've seen some of it here and there. over the years. When I was a kid, I was more into it, but now I really haven't followed it, at least in 15 years, at least. I don't really know what's going on, but from everything I've seen, it's what you remember. It's Spider-Man going around, helping out the city, trying to save the city from villains. That's what he does, and that's what he does in this game as well. And the story is okay. It's good. It's not great. It's certainly not great. And the problem I had with the story mainly is that it seems like they needed more time to finish it. Because the first act and the second act do a pretty good job. It's a little drawn out, but it does a really good job of methodically moving you through the story and setting up the characters and setting up some of the different story beats that you're going to encounter later on in the game. And then the end of the second act ends with a good closing mission. And then you go into the third act and it's just like boom, bang, here's just bang, 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 oh, game's over. It's like everything just got jammed together and there's no pacing whatsoever in the third act. And that to me really dragged the story down. Although to be honest, the best cutscenes in the game were also in the final act. So it's a mixed bag in many ways. It's more interesting at the end, but it's more rushed. It's definitely more rushed. And I prefer to have that slower burn. And they could have still done all these story beats. And I just feel like I feel like it got rushed at the end and they were forced to cut off some content. Because the third act it seemed a little bit shorter. Maybe that's just me. Maybe if I really added up all the time, it wouldn't actually be shorter. But it felt shorter and it certainly felt more rushed. It's just like, all this happens, bang. All this happens, bang. And now it's just like, it's a boss rush. You just go boss, 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 the game's over. And it's really kind of a downer. And another part of the problem is that the main story was so heavily reliant on you're either going to a warehouse or a corporate headquarters or something. You're going somewhere and you're just going to wipe out, a ton of enemies. Wave after wave after wave of enemies. And that's all that's going to happen. And then you're going to have a boss fight. But all the boss fights pretty much are jammed into that very end of the game. You're only going to have 2 or 3 boss fights, I think, before the final act. And then it goes boss fight, boss fight, boss fight, boss fight. 4 in a row. Bang, game's over. And like I said, there's no pacing there. And the problem is when it does try to stretch the story out, it falls back on some old-time comic book game tropes that are just, oh man, have these been done before? Let me ask you this. Is it a requirement for every single superhero game to have a segment where the hero has his mind taken over by the enemy, or they get cast into an alternate dimension, or they get drugged, or they get forced into a dream state where they have to confront their past? Does this have to happen in every single superhero video game? Does it? Because it happened in this game, and I just had to start rolling my eyes. Because we've seen, how many times has this happened in the Arkham games? It's to the point now where when it starts happening, I just got to roll my eyes because it's like, oh, here we go again. You're going to pull me back out of this city. You're going to pull me back out of this story to send me into, a dream world. Just so it's basically so the artist can flex their muscles. But you want to know what? How many times have we seen these dream sequences where it's just your nemesis yelling at you while you go through a floating city where everything's broken apart and you just have to go from place to place to place while another character talks to you, and it just has no imagination at all. And I must have played 100 of these different sequences this generation. It's like every game has to have that in it. Can we please stop doing that, guys? And Spider-Man is guilty of that, and it does it a couple different times in the main story alone, where it puts you into this sort of altered dimension. I think it might happen 2 or 3 times at least, where Spider-Man gets put into a different reality, or he gets drugged or something like that. And it's just like, if that's the best thing you have to mix up the story, I don't know. That we got to do better than this. And this is my problem. The main story, the missions themselves aren't very interesting. The story and the cutscenes are good, but the missions aren't. You're just going to be beating up dudes with an occasional boss fight that are one note. The boss fights are one note. Every boss has 1 or 2 moves, and that's it. That's it. And you just dodge them until they wear themselves out. That's every boss fight. Every single boss fight. And And with the enemies, you just basically, I mean, like I said, it feels good, and that's the saving grace of the game. It feels good, and you have fun with the way the game feels. But the story's really nothing special, unless maybe you're really, really into Spider-Man. But if you're just playing this as a game that you want to try to play because it's getting good reviews, then I don't think you're probably not going to love this, unless you are a Spider-Man fan and invested in this world and invested in this backstory. Because there's some glaring holes, especially in the third act. I was rolling my eyes and laughing at some of the stuff that happened in the third act, which was supposed to be super dramatic, and it was so unbelievable that I was just laughing at it because it was just so. I'm telling you, if you play it, look at it from this perspective, and you tell me, see if you agree with me, if you think that third act is rushed or not. Because to me, it's clearly rushed. But let's move on. I've dwelt on this long enough. Let's move on. Now, I can't talk about a superhero game without discussing some of the supervillains in the game. And there's about, I don't know, maybe about 10 different supervillains that they have in the game. And most of them you're going to encounter only in the main story quest. And we'll get to that in just a second. But the interaction you have with the rest of them is minimal at best. There's only one chain of side quests that I came into where it actually seemed to follow a real storyline and you actually really encountered the enemy in cutscenes and stuff like that. Other than that, it's just voices over your phone. And none of the optional side villains seemed anywhere close to as fleshed out as they are in the Arkham games. Not even close. Arkham City, Arkham Knight, the chains of quests that you get for the villains in those games is way more in depth than anything you're going to get here. So if you're coming in here hoping you're going to get a who's who of Spider-Man enemies to go up against and follow a little side quest for it, that's not happening. You're not getting that. That's being saved for the DLC. Oh yeah, the 3-piece DLC that I had a video about already. Yeah, which is, by the way, the first one's coming out in a few weeks. Yeah, that's right. They cut actual content from the game to give you some. We'll discuss the garbage filler content just coming up here in a second. But let's get back to these supervillains. So yeah, you're not really going to run into too many of them, and the ones you do run into, only 2 of them do they get into any depth with. There's a half dozen of them that you're going to run into during the actually I think 7 that you run into during the main story. But they only go into depth with 2 of them, and the rest of them is just like rush. We're just going to blow past everything out, all the parts of the story with you guys, and they only concentrate on 2, and they do a good job with the 2 that they focus on. But the other guys might as well not even be there. They're literally just there to give you an extra boss fight. There's no point to having these other enemies in the game. They're not justified in any way, and that's part of what I'm saying when I say that I feel like the story is rushed because you didn't need the majority of these enemies to be in this game because there's no point to them being there. They don't do anything realistically. It's just a boss fight to have. And here's another boss fight. That's it. But that's all I got to say about that. Let's move on. And what we're going to move on to is really my biggest, by far, complaint with this game. And this is, to me, what makes this game something that let's just get into it. So the thing that I hate about this game the most is the amount of nonsense filler content that is jammed into this relatively short game. If you just play this campaign, it's only you might be able to beat it in under 10 hours because the combat's not really hard. I only died a handful of times the entire game, and I never died at the same spot twice. So it's you can get through the game without dying much. So it's not a question of difficulty. It's not like I was, bulldozing my way through the game. No, but if you just played the story missions, you would get through the game in about 10 hours. But it's more than double that if you want to do 100% of everything. And I know you might say, Coach, well, that's pretty standard for an open world game. And yeah, it is. But the problem is this game is using a 5-year-old map system. This is like start of this generation, 2013, 2014 sort of a map system where it's just like, Here's a map. We're going to burp a lot of icons out on the map. There's radio towers to unlock. That's no lie. There's radio towers, just like a Ubisoft game, just like every Ubisoft game. And Ubisoft gets hammered for being so rote, for being so Ubisoft. Like, oh, this has been done before. We've seen this. So guys, if you're sick of it in a Ubisoft game, you have to be sick of it in a Spider-Man game too, because it's the same garbage. And in fact, the Spider-Man filler content, the side filler content, is even worse than a lot of games. Some of it's downright bad. And I'm going to get into the real worst part in a second here. But some of it's downright bad. It's just typical stuff. Go collect a bunch of these. Go collect a bunch of these. Here's some places to go take a picture of that we thought you might think were cool. And those are really the best things. The landmarks in the game are the best. Those are the best things you have to find. And if you're a big fan of Spider-Man, you probably enjoy going around hunting for the backpacks. But there's 55 backpacks you can go find, and you're not really finding them. They're marked on your map. And if you get close, they start beeping. And if that's not enough to help you find it, you just click the R3 button and boom, it just shows up through buildings on your map. It just starts glowing through walls. So you just go and pick it up. So it's just a waste of time. And you go and you pick them up, and then if you open up the pack and look at the item, Peter Parker will give you a little 2-second anecdote about what the item is. Like, oh, that's a hairbrush that I combed my hair with when I was 17. Oh, geez. Glad I got this back. It's just stuff like that. And it's stuff like that relates to different criminals that you've caught, stuff to your relationship with Mary Jane and all that. But there's 55 of them. So that's pretty standard collectibles. And then there's other just mind-bogglingly basic collectibles, like chasing pigeons through the city. It's exactly the same thing that you did in Assassin's Creed when they had you chasing little slips of paper through the air. It's the same thing. You just parkour around until you catch the thing. This is the exact same side mission that they do with this game. You just fly through the city catching a pigeon that's trying to fly away from you. It's garbage. And then you have missions where you have to go and look through a telescope and try to find this one little doll in the cityscape, and you got to zoom in, and you're literally just sitting there looking through a telescope. There's no puzzle to solve. You're just looking through a telescope until you find the thing. So it's not only is it copying the Riddler thing, the Riddler trophies that we saw in Arkham Asylum back in 2009, but it's 10 years ago. We saw this stuff, and this is less imaginative than those. You literally are just looking through a telescope until you find a glowing object, and it's done. That's another one of the side activities that you have to do. And you might say, "Oh, Coach, you don't have to do it." No, but it gives you this checklist, and if you want to 100% complete the checklist, that's right there on your map every time. You can't even get away from it. It's just open the whole time. And someone like me, I see an open world with a checklist of things to do. I'm going to try to do it. And the problem is, everything that's on that checklist, for the most part, is hot steaming garbage. There's research labs you can do, which give you little... Those are the only thing that I think they put any time into at all. Those are okay. I'll let those ones slide. Those ones are okay. But then we get to the basic taking over, where, you go around the map and you got to clear out a base of enemies. Except these are just horde mode with the most basic enemies of all time. The last wave is not going to be any more different or more difficult than the second wave. And you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 waves of enemies at every single hideout that you have to take out if you want to clear them out of the map. And you don't take over the base. You don't gain anything from it except you get a token. You get a base token if you take it over. And you get a couple extra base tokens. And you use the tokens to upgrade your stuff. Oh, yeah, that's right. All the side activities are tied to your upgrades. That's right. You can't upgrade anything unless you do these terrible side activities. Nothing. You have to do these side activities to upgrade your gadgets. If you want to craft a new suit that you've unlocked, well, you can't put that new suit on until you do some more of this garbage side content. Now, you don't have to unlock new suits. You can just play in the same suit the whole game, and you'll be fine. The suits don't really do too much. Each suit has a special skill, but you can get by with the skill that you start the game with. So it's not a big deal, because the game's not that hard. So you don't need to do any of that. It's all optional. But it's more than half the game. It's easily more than half the game if you want to 100% it. Way more than the story mission. And I haven't gotten to the worst part yet. If you want to 100% complete this game, you need to clear out all 9 districts that they have set up in Manhattan. It's the whole Isle of Manhattan. And you have to clear out all 9 districts. And each district has 5 random encounters that you have to do. They're called, they're just random crimes. You got to do those. Each one of those has 5. So there's 45 random crimes you have to do for 100%. Oh, but that's not it. Central Park, take that one out of the mix because that only has 5 random crimes. But the other 8 districts give you 3 more factions of random crimes you have to take over in addition to the original faction. So you'll have 4 different factions of enemies that you will have to do 5 separate random encounters for to clear 100% of this game. If you add it all up, it's 165 random crimes that you have to stop. 165 of them. Like I said, this is a 10-hour game. And you want me, if I want 100% of the game, which I do because I'm that sort of player, you want me to do 165 random crimes? And guys, there's only 4 different types of crime. So I'm doing the same mission 40 times. Stop. It amounts to, oh, there's an accident. Go help the victims and then beat up some enemies. Oh, there's a random crime happening in the middle of the street. Go beat up the enemies. Oh, there's some cops that need some help. Go beat up some enemies. Or my favorite, there's a car chase. And you have to stop the car and then beat up the enemies. That's it. And you have to do 165 of them. I'm not exaggerating. It's exactly 165. Now, again, you can say, Coach, that's all optional. Don't get hung up on that. Okay, fine. That's fine. Well, then what are you left with? You're left with a 10-hour game that feels fun to play. Okay. So let's get down to the brass tacks. Is that worth $60 to you? This is a review. I'm going to tell you whether or not I think you should buy this game, right? I don't know. Do you think a 10-hour experience with an additional 10 to 15 hours of hot, steaming garbage side content is worth it? Now I've said the gameplay is really good. Top-notch gameplay. The setting is good. The city looks good. The graphics are good. The game runs well. I didn't encounter any bugs. The voice acting is very good. The story is okay. The cutscenes are very good. But the game itself, is the game itself good? I honestly don't know. Like I said, I had fun playing it because I kept getting that endorphin rush every time. Whee! Swing up in the air, you get whee, whee. You get that feeling, and it works because you feel good playing it. So you have fun playing it. If you just want a fun, relatively mindless game that you can go through and play, yeah, maybe it is worth $60 to you. But just be aware, it's a pretty short game. I would recommend probably waiting for a sale. I'll be honest. And since they already have 3 DLC packs planned, maybe just wait for a Game of the Year edition. If this is something you're really interested in. It's not multiplayer in any way, so you're not going to be losing, progress against other people. This is a game you can consume when you want. And if you haven't bought it already, I gotta assume you're not a diehard Spider-Man player that was just dying to play this game. If you had, you would have bought it already after the first wave of reviews came out. So, if you're looking for it now, odds are you're kind of on the fence, and if you're on the fence, I would say wait. Because it's a short game. And it has problems. And I'm not going to buy the DLC, but I would probably buy a sequel. If I heard that they, maybe shored up some of this problem. I think a sequel to this game could be really good. Because they have the mechanics of the game down now. So if they took that time to make better quests, do a little bit more fleshed out story, especially that problematic third act, which is just like, a rush job, a real rush job, that final act. But if they shored up some of the weaknesses of this game, this truly could be the greatest superhero game of all time, which is what we keep seeing emblazoned across headlines. Is this the greatest superhero game of all time? I'd have to say probably not. Now, I haven't played too many superhero games, so maybe you think it is. If you've played it, maybe you do think this is. Some people will think that. And it does do some things better than any other game. The combat is really damn good. Like I said, moving around the city, it takes a backseat to no one when it comes to getting around a city. It really doesn't. It's great. But it has so many glaring open worlds things that we've all done. If you play open world games, you've done this 1,000 times. If I had to give you a comparison to this game, I would say it's a little bit of Batman and it's a little bit of Infamous. It feels a lot like Infamous Second Son in a lot of ways. And it has some of the generic Ubisoft crap side content. And just mash all that together and put a Spider-Man face on it with some great traversal, and that's what this game is. That's my opinion on it. So, would I play it again? No, I'm not going to play it again. I'm going to try to get 100%, get the platinum trophy for the game, and then I'm going to be probably done with it for good. Like I said, I'm not really interested in getting DLC. I'm not going to support their DLC plan when I feel, like I said, there's a whole lot of garbage filler content in this game. So no, I'm not going to pay you for extra content. Because if that content's any good, I'm just going to be mad that you didn't have it in the original game. And if the content's not good, then I'm not going to miss out by not playing it anyway, am I? And I've already done a couple videos recently about why I'm not buying a season pass. So maybe if there's a really, really compelling piece of DLC that comes out, maybe that Black Cat DLC that they've already announced is going to be great. Well, if it is, it comes out in about 5 weeks. You could have just put it in the game. Unless it's completely not ready. But maybe you could have taken some of that time that you spent making all that garbage content and maybe put there was a little bit more to this game, I would be definitely recommending it. But it's not there. Instead, you gave me it's like you gave me a sandwich with one piece of bread on it, and I'm looking for the other piece of bread. And there's not much meat in the middle here. Looks good, but then when you flip it over, you realize that the other half of the game's not there, is it? So that's my thoughts. I'm Coach Toolshed. You guys let me know what you think. Maybe you played it and you love this game. Tell me how wrong I am down in the comments below. If you haven't played the game, maybe I gave you some information that you probably haven't heard anywhere else because I don't hear too many people complaining. I hear a lot of people praising everything about this game. It's the most perfect game they've ever played. I think that's nuts. I think the Metacritic score is a little too high. I don't put number scores on my game, but I think the Metacritic score is overstating things a little bit. This is a very average open world game. But it's a Spider-Man game, so people are going to give it probably an extra point or two if they're a big Spider-Man fan. Like I said, I'm not. I'm viewing this as just a game. And I don't think it's as good as people are making it out to be. It has its moments. And if you can get it on sale or borrow it from a friend, yeah, pick it up and play it. But just know you'll be done in a week. And if you don't go for 100%, there's really not a whole lot there. You can probably beat it in a day or two. So, that's all I have to say. I hope the next game is a little bit better. I'd say that. I would most likely buy a sequel. So, take that as you will. I think this is a franchise that has a chance. But we'll see how it goes. I'm Coach Toolshed. You guys let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. And as always, keep it turned to 11.